The one thing that always got to me about yoga and mindfulness and those types of things is that the research in this area isn't where it needs to be. And I, every now and then, I'll go online and just type in latest research on XYZ. And I did that earlier this year as it pertains to yoga. And up popped Dr. Hilary. And I read some of her articles and I thought, I got to get to know her. So I reached out to her. I do what I always do. And I said, this is what WFAN does. This is who I am. And we need to get you as a guest speaker. And might have been within a few hours, Hilary closed the loop with me and said, let's get together. And we met over a cup of coffee. And here we are. And I want to expose people to this amazing neuroscientist who is doing some incredible work at Wayne State University. She's going to introduce Sensei Plowden, but Dr. Hilary, I turn it over to you to get things kicked off.
All right, thanks so much, Mario. So I will be introducing Sensei Plowden in one moment, but just to give you a quick breakdown of what I'm going to talk about. Just a full disclosure, I'm a neuroscientist, but don't worry, I didn't bring all of my slides because that would take for a very long time. So I'm going to introduce Sensei Plowden, who's going to do a really interesting interactive demonstration for us that'll really set the stage for describing some of the neuroscience related to mindfulness, yoga, and meditation practices. I'll cover just a little bit of our exciting work we've done over the past couple of years. And then I will end with some applications for trauma and addiction recovery. And then again, we'll hear from some of the people on the front lines doing that important work.
Hilary, real quick, just to interject something before you introduce Sensei. Everybody knows that this meeting is being recorded, and many of you have emailed us to say, I couldn't make it. How do I get a copy of it? It will be emailed to all of you through our newsletter, okay? And if you have questions, just put them in the chat feature. We're going to make sure we leave enough time at the end of today's forum to answer as many questions as we can get to and still end on time at 8:30. Sorry about that, Hilary.
No, all set. So Sensei Richard Plowden, I've known for over 7 years through my work with Kids Kicking Cancer, which, if you don't know, is a Michigan-based nonprofit organization that provides free martial arts therapy for children experiencing a variety of different stressful experiences like cancer, sickle cell. Recently, they've expanded to other populations like school children and people in addiction recovery, and I'll get to that shortly. But Master Plowden is a 9th degree black belt and a 5-time martial arts world champion, so don't get on his bad side. He's been dedicating the past 20 plus years to service to Kids Kicking Cancer, to helping children in need. So I'll turn it over to Sensei Richard.
Thank you, Dr. Hilary Marusak. Hello, everyone. As Hilary said, I've been involved with Kids Kicking Cancer, or what is now called the Hero Circle, because a number of different groups that we work with, we've expanded beyond cancer, but more than 20 years. I've been a martial artist. This will be my 50th year as a martial artist, but coming to work for Kids Kicking Cancer literally changed my life. Because as Hilary noted, I'm someone who was heavily involved in tournament competition. As an aside, I'm still involved, not as a competitor, but as an instructor and coach now, but working with these young people that had cancer and being able to introduce them to techniques, not so much the physical, but techniques that will affect them mentally to help improve their lives and the challenges that they go through. Now, if any of you have ever studied martial arts, you understand that we have what we call the yin and the yang, the hard and the soft. And the soft portions of the martial arts are things that a lot of people don't quite understand, particularly now that we're in an MMA-centric environment or everybody sees MMA on television. They see the fighting, they see the contact. We don't do any of that with any of the groups that we work with. We do non-contact martial arts, primarily focusing on the soft. Now, particularly with children that we work with, they become enamored by the physical part, you know, teaching them a block, teaching them punches, teaching them kicks. We certainly do that, but we use that as the carrot to get inside their heads and encourage them to fight whatever else is coming their way. Most of the kids that we deal with, we're not concerned about them being attacked on the street and needing to know self-defense, but they get attacked every day with some element of disease, or if it's a kid that we're working with in a school environment, frustration, anger, those types of things. So the breathing technique that we're going to do today will assist individuals with that, but we have to pre-frame. And we pre-frame the young people and the older individuals that we work with by letting them know that when they're breathing in, we want them to think something positive. It's what we refer to as the light. And the light can be courage, it can be love, it can be happiness. Those are the things that we want individuals to focus in on when they're doing this particular breathing technique that we call a breath break. And then when they're blowing out, we want them to consciously realize that they're blowing out pain, anger, fear, frustration, the things that affect all of us. So this level of power breathing is something that all of us can do. So if I can, let me have everyone sit up straight in their chairs. Typically with the young people, we do it standing, but we're going to do this sitting up straight in our chairs, making sure that our backs are straight, our diaphragm can open up. We're going to rub our hands together to get some heat going, to get some energy going as we begin to focus. Now, we hold our hands down at our waist, we dip our chins, and when we do this, we create like a wave movement in breathing in and breathing out. But our hands are down, we dip our chins. I tell the young people that I want them to be selfish. So in being selfish, I want them to close their eyes so that they can focus on themselves. So we're gonna watch me first before you close your eyes, but we're gonna pull our hands up, raising our bodies, breathing in the air. When we get to the top, we're going to take in a little more, and then we're going to push out anything that's bothering us, lowering our bodies. And when we get down to the bottom, we're going to push out the last little bit of air. So we're going to do this 4 times. So we're going to breathe in the light, pull up, thinking about something positive, and then push out the darkness. Push out whatever negative may be going on in your heads. Push out a little more. Breathe in the light, breathe in the happiness. Pulling up. And now we're going to push out the fear. Push out the fear. Breathe in the love. Push out the hatred. Breathe in the courage. Push out the frustration. Very good. And as simple as that may seem, the impact that it's had, particularly on those children that we have who are in different disease states, cancer, sickle cell, hemophilia, is amazing. Because when I go into a hospital and I see a kid who's hospitalized, most of the time they'll sit back and say, Sensei Richard, can we do a breath break? Because that's them taking control. And we let them know that this is a martial arts technique that they're learning, that they're powerful martial artists, and that they can fight anything that is coming their way. Thank you guys for being such an awesome audience. Mario, thank you for having me. Dr. Hilary Marusak, thank you for thinking about us.
Thank
Thanks so
you,
much,
Sensei
Richard.
Richard.
All right, everyone, take care.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for joining. All right, so with that being said, that was a great demonstration. So what is he talking about mindfulness and meditation? So Mindfulness is very broadly just the idea that we need to stay focused on the present moment. That's the opposite of having your mind full, shown on the left here. That could be worrying about your to-do list, worrying about the past, worrying about the future. Mindfulness is really the opposite of that. It's staying focused again on the present moment in a very non-judgmental way. Mindfulness is a type of meditation. There are a variety of different types of meditations. Meditations are just the practice on cultivating that mindful state, and we'll come back to that shortly. There's a lot of different ways to cultivate this mind-body link that a lot of people talk about. Some people get it from yoga, from different forms of meditation, from even martial arts, as we talked about, but there's a variety of different practices, which makes it really beneficial for people who like to try different things. Maybe yoga isn't for you, but maybe things like art therapy or dance therapy are for you. As Mario said right off the bat, typically in the scientific realm, these were thought of as sort of woo-woo practices. And it wasn't until about 10 to 15 years ago that really rigorous academic researchers have been actually studying this and showing how it affects people at the level of the brain. Recently, my colleague Lana Grasser and I wrote a commentary about what we call the expressive therapies continuum, which just shows that there are a variety of different mind-body practices, ranging from things like physical activity, which also engages a lot of this mind-body connection, all the way up through things like music and art therapy. And a lot of these have different effects on different body and brain systems. So again, it's really helpful to sort of tailor these practices to what works best for you, what you enjoy, because you're only going to do things that you enjoy. And also we can kind of tailor different interventions for different types of disease spaces that we know have certain effects on the body, like addiction. And I'll come back to that later. So why should we be interested in mind-body techniques? We all know that there's significant gaps in our mental and our physical healthcare services currently. In the realm of psychiatry, which is where I'm based, we have a lot of evidence-based treatments for mental disorders that work really well for some people, but not all people. And for people in addiction recovery, that means that not everyone benefits and not everyone stays sober over time. Mind-body techniques can help to fill that in. They may also be more cost-effective and more accessible than things like medication or talk therapy. Greater accessibility. So we've shown with Kids Kicking Cancer that we can integrate these things easily into school settings. I'll come back to that later. We can use the breath break whenever we want in any setting. If you're feeling stressed out while sitting in traffic, you don't need to wait for a medication or to see a physician. You can actually take control of your own emotions at any time. So there's great utility in doing that. A lot of these mind-body interventions have fewer adverse effects. I mean, let's be honest, a lot of the psychiatric medications have pretty significant adverse effects. And if we're talking about using those in children and adolescents, when your brain is still developing, well, we don't know if those have long-term negative effects on the developing brain. One really powerful conception that Kids Kicking Cancer taught me was that kids with cancer have very little control over their lives. They're often held in the hospital. They have no say over what they can do. They're held down for invasive and sometimes painful treatment procedures. And they really feel like they're a victim of their experiences. They have no control. And one thing that these mind-body techniques do, including martial arts, is it allows them to reframe themselves as a victim to a victor. They can actually take control over their own experiences and their own emotions. And that reframing really transcends into multiple aspects of life, like how they eat. They want to eat to train themselves as a martial artist, how they do in school. It's a really powerful concept. I don't think anyone on this call would be surprised that we're in the midst of a mental health pandemic. Following the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, a report from the World Health Organization showed that there is a 25% increase in the prevalence of anxiety and depression. These are hugely burdensome disorders. Suicidal thoughts and behaviors have also increased, particularly among healthcare workers. Loneliness is an issue that we hear often about. For those with pre-existing health conditions like substance use disorders, we saw that the severity and the mortality has actually increased following the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. And then we saw a disruption of service. People couldn't make it to their healthcare workers. They couldn't get the help that they needed. I think as everyone on this call knows that we are also in the midst of a drug overdose pandemic. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a steady increase in drug overdose deaths. Following COVID, the actual overdose deaths far exceeded what was predicted. So even based on that trending increase, COVID really was associated with an even more dramatic increase in overdose deaths. So a lot of people are really suffering. All right, so talking about mindfulness and mind-body techniques, how we study this at the level of the brain is primarily with neuroimaging techniques or brain imaging. So we could look at things like brain structure and function. We can look at how the brain responds to different tasks. For example, you could show pictures of fearful faces, and you can actually see that people's brains respond as if they're experiencing fear or anxiety themselves. So we can actually tap into how people experience pain and fear in the scanner and study how different mind-body techniques can actually modify those brain areas. A lot of this research was actually kicked off a couple decades ago by Richard Davidson's group at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And he was one of the first people to actually show differences related to meditation practice. And what he did was he brought in long-term meditators and he compared them at the level of the brain to people who had never practiced meditation, so meditation naive individuals. And what he found was that those who were long-term meditators actually had lower activity in a brain region associated with fear and also anxiety. That is the amygdala. That's like our fear center in the brain. So that was really interesting to show that meditation practice can actually dampen down how your brain is responding to threatening cues or stressful cues. And there is a dose-dependent response. So the more hours of open monitoring retreat practice that these people engaged in, the lower their brain activity was. So a lot of these mind-body practices are just practices. The more you engage in them, the more benefits you potentially have. And he's gone on, and others have gone on to show meditation and mindfulness have a variety of different effects on the brain. They improve your ability to pay attention, to control your autonomic nervous system. So that feeling of when you get super anxious, your palms may be sweaty, your heart may race, you may get a stomach ache. All of those can be modified by meditation practice. Also is associated with lower levels of cortisol, which is a stress hormone. And recent studies actually show it may have benefits for aging. It can actually stave off age-related cortical thinning of the cerebral cortex, possibly helping to combat some of that cognitive impairment we see with aging. One recent study looked at a specific form of meditation called mindful acceptance, which is simply the practice of just experiencing emotions as they arise and just being okay with them, letting them go, not judging them. They had these people go into the scanner and actually do that while they were experiencing a thermal pain. So they were experiencing heat on their skin. And really interestingly, what they could see is that when they're actually accepting their emotions versus reacting to them, they could actually lower activity in brain areas associated with pain. We call those the pain neuromatrix, and I'll come back to that later. But that's really powerful. Again, like a simple, seemingly simple technique we can actually use to reduce how your brain is processing pain. They found something similar when they showed people fearful faces, which again, kind of mimics our natural fear and anxiety response. When they were just simply experiencing that fear or anxiety and just being okay with it, letting it go, they saw a similar reduction in brain areas that are responsible for fear and anxiety. So really simple techniques, very exciting results though. There's obviously a lot of different types of meditation. If you just go to YouTube and type in meditation, you're going to see so many different techniques. What people have seen is that a lot of these actually have different effects on the brain. And this is what I was kind of alluding to earlier, that if we can tailor our meditation practices to areas that we know are affected by addiction, then we might be able to have the most effective type of meditation or even yoga practice just by looking at what's happening at the level of the brain. And although different meditation techniques seem to affect different brain areas, there's a common set of brain regions that are known to be affected by things like mindfulness and meditation. And that brain network is called the default mode network. This network is really interesting because it was discovered to be more active basically when you're doing nothing. So when you're just sitting there and your mind is wandering and you're worried about the past or the future, this network is very active. And one thing that meditation seems to do consistently is actually reduce activity in this network. So it kind of turns down that mind wandering brain and makes you focus on the present moment. And reductions in this network are linked to improvements in things like depression, anxiety, different types of addictions. So this is kind of interesting that meditation seems to have this common effect on the default mode network. So why is that important? A really interesting study that pinged over 2,000 people on their smartphones a couple times a day. And they were asking basically, what are you doing when I just pinged you? And how happy are you? And what they found was that people have different levels of happiness for different activities, right? The ones on the left may be more happy, like less happy while working versus exercising and other types of physical activity may be associated with more happiness. But their take-home message was that people were less happy when they were mind wandering, when they were worried about the past or the future. And when they were not mind wandering, that is when they were focused on the present moment, they were more happy. So they coined the phrase, a wandering mind is an unhappy mind. And I think that really gets to the heart of how these mind-body techniques may work. Partnered with Kids Kicking Cancer, my medical student Anish here also showed that children can do the same thing. They can actually use meditation while on the scanner, and they can reduce activity in their own default mode network. And this is really important because kids, just like adults, have stresses and worries and anxieties, and they can also use this technique. I'm a developmental neuroscientist, so I think these techniques are extra exciting in kids because I think we all know the prefrontal cortex, which is that front part of the brain. This is kind of a top-down view of your brain, is one of the latest to develop. So I'll show you a quick video of the brain developing, so changes in cortical thickness, and you'll see that more blue areas are more development. So you'll see the back of the brain, more like sensory areas, kind of the lizard brain develop before the front of the brain. So the back becomes more blue, and then the front of the brain doesn't develop until 20s or even 30s in some studies. So the fact that these meditation techniques don't work based on the prefrontal cortex, it actually works with a different system, the default mode network, suggests that they're accessible for kids. We also know that the prefrontal cortex is impaired in addiction, right? The prefrontal cortex is involved in things like decision-making and inhibiting our response and saying, no, I don't need to take that drug. I don't need to seek that drug. So that goes to show that mind-body techniques actually may have really positive benefits on addiction recovery as well. I do want to point out that the main reason to practice these techniques, and not in my view, is not to get these mental health benefits. I think that's a nice side effect, but the real purpose is to learn something different about your brain and how your brain actually works. And that your mind, thoughts can come up and it doesn't define you. There's not really a thinker behind the thoughts. And that's a really powerful thing that you can learn over time with this practice. And I think of it as akin to reading a book. So there are a lot of benefits, but I think the real reason is to really change the way that you think about your own brain and mind. All right, so I'm going to talk really briefly about some of our research. And as you heard previously, this was done in collaboration with Kids Kicking Cancer, who's been providing these martial arts techniques to help children who are very sick since 1999. They're actually now in 9 countries. And one of the first things that we found was that PTSD we always think about as being in adults who've been exposed to war, veterans, police, and other first responders. But actually children can experience post-traumatic stress disorder as well. And although rates of the full-blown PTSD are pretty rare in these populations, if you break down the different symptoms of PTSD, like flashbacks or nightmares about scary things that happened, children with cancer and other chronic illnesses can also have those experiences, as can other kids without chronic illnesses. And we found that more post-traumatic stress symptoms are associated with larger volume of the amygdala. So even during development, the brain is sort of primed to engage and to respond and react in stressful experiences. So I was very interested in using these mind-body techniques to see if we can actually help to address post-traumatic stress symptoms in kids. So we've been partnering with Kids Kicking Cancer for over 7 years. We found that children who are more mindful have more flexibility in their brain states, which is correlated with their reductions in anxiety. We also found that if you do a 1-hour martial arts class by Sensei Richard and others, children report significantly less pain and less emotional distress. And I always say, if you've got a medication that works within 1 hour and to this extent, you've got a hit. And this is a really simple, again, behavioral technique that we can use. Kids can use at bedside, they can use wherever they need it, and it causes a significant reduction in pain and emotional distress. We've also adapted this for the school environment. So we partnered with Oak Park School District, which is just outside of Detroit. And we found that their program throughout the school year was able to reduce stress and anxiety in children. And more importantly, this coincided with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we found that even 5 months after school ended and kids were at home, they were still using these martial arts techniques like the breath break that we just saw, and they were reporting significant benefit. So a lot of these can be really sustainable, which is, again, very exciting. Most relevant to this crowd, we partnered with the methadone maintenance clinic, which is just below my lab in the Tolan Park Medical Building, which is on the Wayne State University's medical campus. And we partnered with Kids Kicking Cancer to see if those kids can actually help people in addiction recovery. So these were people with opioid use disorder on methadone maintenance treatment. And the idea was that if you see a kid who has cancer, they don't have hair, they're teaching you how you can take control over your own stress, how they've been able to when they're receiving venipunctures and port starts and lumbar punctures. You're going to listen. And if you're someone in addiction recovery, you're going to want to try to use those techniques to help yourself and also help those kids. And the kids in turn feel like they're teaching the world these techniques. They have a purpose in life, which is to show people that they too can take control over their own stress and emotions. So that really forms the basis of the Hero Circle, which is a really interesting platform that I think could be applied to people in addiction recovery and trauma, a variety of other places. So what Kids Kicking Cancer did in this study was they created a virtual reality version of this intervention where Sensei Plowden, who might look familiar to you now, actually teaches you these techniques along with other children. These are based on actual children of Kids Kicking Cancer. And it's a really interesting virtual reality. You actually go into the back of your brain so you can see the neurons firing. It's actually really cool. And you're able to see the beast that has really hijacked your prefrontal cortex and your limbic system. And that beast is addiction. And they're actually able to breathe in the light and blow out the darkness and see that beast diminish in real time. So really powerful technique for them to use. So what we did was we recruited 15 people who wanted to try this martial arts intervention on top of their current treatments. And we scanned them with our MRI scanner at Wayne State. They did that virtual reality intervention for 12 weeks. They also got pinged on their phone every 2 hours while they're at home to remind them to do that breath break. And then we brought them back to see if there were any differences in their brain. And what we found was that from pre to post, so the blue bars to the green bars, people who did the program reported significantly less pain, they craved opioids less, and they had lower anxiety and depression. They also had lower cortisol, which again is a marker of stress. And when we looked at their brain, we could actually measure activity in that pain matrix. And we found that there was a significant reduction in activity in the pain matrix. So their brain was responding less to pain. They were perceiving pain as less than before they started the program. And people who had lower activity near the left here in that pain matrix also reported that pain interfered with their daily lives less. So it didn't prevent them as much from doing their work, hanging out with their family, things like that. So there's actually a really powerful impact on their lives. All right, Mario asked me to talk specifically about yoga and applications to trauma and addiction recovery. So I'll talk about the research on that briefly. Most of the research in this area has been on mindfulness-based interventions, which have a very broad definition. But a recent systematic review, which we think of as like the top of the evidence base, it's a summary of all the research in this area, actually showed that for people in addiction recovery, it can have pretty significant effects on things like craving and stress. Turning to yoga, there's less research on yoga, but what I did find was pretty encouraging. There was only 8 studies, but 7 of them showed pretty positive effects in combination with pharmacotherapy, again, like methadone or buprenorphine maintenance. And this bottom part is really encouraging because most reported no adverse effects. So there wasn't potentially any negative or downside to practicing these techniques. A systematic review of brain imaging studies was able to look at people who practice yoga versus people who do not meditate. And they found a variety of positive effects on the brain. They found differences in brain structure and brain function, in composition of different neurochemicals that are involved in things like plasticity and learning and memory. They found really consistent areas in a brain region called the insula, which is really important for sensing different bodily sensations, like feeling your heartbeat. That's really, I think that'll make a lot of sense for the yogis in the room. And also the hippocampus, which is involved in things like stress regulation and learning and memory. This is a really new area of research, and it does have some limitations. For example, this was a comparison of groups of people who did yoga versus didn't. Obviously, there's a lot of differences between people who choose to do yoga versus not, so that should be considered. And more studies are needed to follow people as they try yoga for the first time to see if there are, in fact, differences that are sustainable. But I think the bottom line here is that there's really a growing evidence base to support that yoga and other mind-body interventions do have an effective place in addiction management therapy programs, in addition to things like pharmacotherapy and talk therapy. So I'll conclude with some next steps. I think a lot of you in the audience, I'm hoping that I convinced you to at least try something like meditation or yoga or pick your poison. There are a ton of classes, and you just heard about some free classes through FAN. But if you go to your local gym or even you Google or YouTube classes, there are so many different free classes. There's a lot of great apps on mindfulness and meditation. One called Headspace actually has a lot of scientific research behind it. So those are great places to start. I think we need to do a lot collectively to work on accessibility. And what I mean by that is getting these techniques and these programs to people who need it the most. That could be people in addiction recovery, people who have experienced trauma, people who really need these programs. Policy changes. I do want to mention the National Institutes of Health is the biggest funder of medical research in the United States. That is taxpayer funded. A lot of research that comes out of addiction recovery and new treatments is actually funded by the NIH. They have a specific branch or institute that is specifically for substance use disorders, but they don't often include things like mind-body techniques. So in 1991, Congress did establish the very first Center for Complementary and Integrative Health. And this is all about researching mind-body techniques like acupuncture and yoga. However, it receives the second lowest funding allocation of all the centers at NIH. So what that means is that the research is still lacking, and a lot of people end up paying out of pocket for things like yoga. So I think if we were to do something and contact your lawmaker to support NIH funding, that would go a long way. And then finally, we need to do more on the research side. The existing studies are really promising, but they haven't reached that gold standard level that we expect in the medical field. And Mario, I would like to talk to you offline about these, but I think there's a lot of ways by which Wayne State and Kids Kicking Cancer can collaborate with FAN and you all. One of the exciting things coming down the pipeline is the idea that we can use biofeedback to actually look at what our brain is doing real time in a scanner. So we can actually picture what your default mode network is doing, and you can practice calming down that activity using the breath break, using whatever meditation technique you would like. And that's a really great way to optimize your intervention practice. So we could do that for kids with post-traumatic stress, as well as those in addiction recovery. And then another area that we're really interested in is neuroinflammation. So a lot of psychiatric disorders like depression and post-traumatic stress disorder, and also substance use disorder, are increasingly recognized to be associated with inflammation in the brain. And a recent study actually came out showing that people with long COVID also have inflammation in the brain, and that may contribute to a variety of negative effects. So if there's a way that we can look at whether these mind-body techniques can actually reduce inflammation, that may explain how these techniques work, because it's still pretty unclear how they work at the level of the brain. And then finally, I'll post this in the chat, but we do have an ongoing study that pays up to $400 for people who are currently on methadone maintenance treatment, who would like to help us understand if neuroinflammation is affected in opioid use disorder. So highly encourage you to get involved in research. That's another way to give back. And thank you so much. Don't hesitate to reach out.
So before I introduce our next guest speaker, who is our yoga instructor, Chelsea Broad-Pure. So Hilary, just to ask you real quick, so you have kids engaged with people in recovery, correct? Did I?
Not directly. We did it through the virtual reality platform, just because that would pose some issues with consent and having minors talk with people.
Yeah, okay. But so look, this is, and thank you for that. That was awesome. And the thing that is interesting, and to those who are listening, and we have some questions coming in, but where I see us working with Hilary in the future, and she's indicated a willingness to do this, is with our Yoga for Recovery program, taking it to the next level and actually doing with our Yoga for Recovery program what Hilary has done with kids, and the kids battling cancer. The name of the organization again, Hilary, was Kids Kicking Cancer. Is that what it was?
I'll put it in the chat. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, put that link out there. And yeah, look, please don't check out on us. We've got some incredible stories that you're going to hear. And with that, yoga instructor extraordinaire, Chelsea, why don't you go ahead and introduce things, and then we'll move to our two guys who are going to share their stories.
All right, thanks, Mario, and thank you. That was incredible. Hi, everybody. I'm Chelsea Broad-Pure. I oversee our Yoga for Recovery program. I'm also one of the instructors, and I do teach trauma-sensitive yoga to a local residential facility in our community. And I'm affiliated, I teach the acupressure program, which is virtual and coming up next Monday if you're interested. I've been with Washtenaw Band since its inception in 2018, so almost 5 years, which, as Mario mentioned earlier, has That's as long as we've had Yoga for Recovery as well. Back during those times, I was the court coordinator for a recovery court, so one of our treatment courts, and that's how I met Mario. After some talking and communicating with him, it seemed very important that we integrate Yoga for Recovery into the community and try to just get as many people involved as we could. So the treatment courts did and still do to this day play a large role in assisting us and welcoming us to the community and help just spreading the word. The recovery community really has also welcomed us with open arms. All of these classes that we do provide weekly are open to everybody. So whether you're in recovery or whether you're an ally, you are always welcome. Classes are accessible, and you'll find a lot of what we really, Dr. Hilary covered just now. So lots of meditation, lots of breath work and mindfulness, a lot of the tools that she went over, as well as what Sensei Richard went over, you're going to see kind of integrated within our program. With that being said, just so people can speak from just some participants we have been open to sharing their stories, so you don't hear it just from me. We have Elliot and David. Hey guys, thanks for being here.
So Dave and Elliot are two participants in the Washtenaw Band Yoga for Recovery program. So Dave, why don't you go ahead and kick things off?
Yes, thank you, everybody. My name is David Ross. I've been doing yoga for about 1.5 years now. A little bit of backstory.
We lost Dave. So let's see, Elliot, why don't you start, share your story, and we'll see if we get Dave back. Go ahead.
I've been coming to Yoga for Recovery for probably about 1.5 years now. This is my first go about in sobriety. I began with the 12 steps of AA, and I guess I was introduced into a tradition where we meditate. Mindfulness is an integral part of my recovery. I carried that forward with the guys that I work with, my sponsor. We begin each session with a 3-minute meditation. And I guess the best, really, analogy I can have for it is that the 12 steps sort of opened the door for me, got my toe in the water. They got me to listen. And yoga, it's the mind-body connection, very much for me is spirituality. That is step 11, which I keep coming back to, is seeking through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with our higher powers. There's a letter that Carl Jung wrote to Bill Wilson, one of the co-founders of AA, back in the 60s, I believe, essentially saying that men of people drink as we do for a thirst for wholeness of being. And I think very much that was my case. I was unwhole, and I was seeking a spiritual. Alcohol woke in my spirit something that I either atrophied or never been developed. And extrapolate that, carry it forward. This mindfulness is the definition of spirituality for me. I am more present in the moment during that 1 hour block, or 2 hours if I do it twice a week, than at any other point in my week. And for that, I am grateful. I will continue to be. I really hope that we continue funding this. I can't imagine recovery without it. I think that's about what I've got to share on the topic.
That's good. That's good. So before we go back to Dave, so Elliot, so you said that when you're in that moment in the class, in the program, that's when you're feeling the most relaxed. Is there any point during the day when that anxiety or whatever is penting up where you learn anything to kind of take you down in that moment?
I engage in various breathing exercises throughout the day.
Okay.
I certainly, anxiety waxes and wanes throughout,
Yeah.
Depending on your circumstance, right? But it is something that is new. Relatively, I'm coming up on 2 years sober. But integrating this meditation practice, and I've gone through other series of meditation. There's a presence practice 12-week process that I went through recently, where it's a series of twice daily meditations, mantras that I say. So I use all of these tools. And I guess for me, the rewarding thing about yoga is there's a link that's between the mind and body that Hilary spoke of. And it very much is. I believe she said, well, really, we're changing the way we think. It's all about that neuroplasticity, right? It's all.
That's right.
This is a disease of perspective, and what I'm doing through this practice is altering my perspective.
Not only that, you were taking notes.
I was. It was fascinating. I'm gonna have to look up on that.
All right.
My default mode network. I don't. That's
that, Elliot, I appreciate you sharing your story. Okay. And Mr. Ross.
Sorry about that, guys. I'm terrible with technology. Where I left off was about 2 years ago. So I've always been in the construction and just really working hard. And about 2 years ago, I ended up getting sober. I was actually pushed into it. But about a year and a half ago, I had this wonderful caring, beautiful soul, which happened to be my probation officer, introduced me to yoga and meditation. And since then, my body feels better. I've learned patience through meditation. And I think that's a key aspect through going through getting sober and living that life because of all that regular life throws at us. So I've been attending at least once or twice a week with the yoga. I've met some wonderful people there. I met one of my best friends there who is also an instructor. And really the stigma also with, we have more guys usually in our yoga class than we do girls. And it's really great on our bodies. And I've always had problems with my lower back and my stomach. And ever since then, I have not had any problems with either of those. So I highly recommend it. It has changed my life. And I usually do it at least once or twice a week.
So Dave, thank you for sharing that. And I will add, it's kind of funny, but the way I got through to you two guys was through Chelsea. And I said, look, I want to get a couple of people who don't mind sharing their stories for our next meeting. And I know that might be kind of tough because the population of people who do yoga tends to skew more toward women. Well, there's that stigma. There's that, I don't know if it's stigma, but it's okay. And Chelsea said, that ain't how it is in Washtenaw County. We run 50% guys. And I was like, well, go recruit a couple. So I'm grateful to Chelsea for doing that. And I don't know what's in the water in Washtenaw County, but we got a lot of guys partaking in our Yoga for Recovery program. And I'm very grateful for that. And to both of you for sharing your stories. Okay, thank you. And with that, we have a freshly minted MSW from the University of Michigan School of Social Work, Sadie. There she is. And Sadie, as a part of her last semester in a class, conducted a study on our Washtenaw Families Against Narcotics Yoga for Recovery program. And it's pretty fascinating stuff. And with that, she's going to spend just a few more minutes talking about this fascinating study that she just wrapped up about a month ago. Sadie, thank you, and go right ahead.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Sadie. Hi, Elliot. I'm an MSW student. I actually graduate in July, but this is like one of my final projects. And I am an instructor with Yoga for Recovery. And that's kind of how I obtained all of this data and information. So I'm going to try and share my screen with you all real quick. Can you all see that?
There it is.
Perfect. Okay, so this, just to be candid, is not only my work. It belongs to me and several of my classmates who have already graduated. But what we did was we took our Washtenaw Families Against Narcotics post surveys that our participants fill out after every practice, and we kind of did a qualitative and quantitative study based on whether if yoga for recovery has been advantageous for our participants' sobriety. And so logic model is really intense, but we wanted to figure out what our target population was, the planned activities and the expected outcomes. So target population, of course, is those who are impacted by substance use disorder. Planned activities is, of course, participating in yoga for recovery to acquire hours of sobriety, also to administer mindfulness techniques. And the expected outcomes are ideally to establish a strong relationship with our sobriety community and to maintain sobriety. This is just some generic overview of our participants. Like Mario, Dave, and Elliot said, a large majority of our participants that attend yoga for recovery are actually male. This is just a rough picture of one of the surveys we distributed that one of our participants actually filled out. One of the lovely things that our participants said about us was a community feeling where there is greater purpose of accountability, compassion, support, and sobriety while doing yoga, the true union. So we actually have a lot of qualitative research that we wanted to include in here, and that was one of them. Just some survey data analysis process. So staff member at Families Against Narcotics manually entered the survey responses into an Excel spreadsheet. We received the Excel spreadsheet, and then one of my group mates cleaned up the data and inputted it into SPSS, and then we coordinated the qualitative data manually. So key variables: sobriety, frequency, duration, beneficients, and recommendations. So 59% of our participants have either received medical assistance or have not within the last year. So 25% never, and then 35% over 1 year. Frequency, so we have roughly 50% of our participants attending once a week, 23% once a month, and then 13% at twice a week, and 3 times, or 14% at 3 times. And then 21% of our yoga for recovery attendants or participants have been attending for, over an entire year. And then 23% were new within the week that the survey was collected. And then, roughly 6, 19, and 17% were varying between 1 and 6 months. 80% of our participants recommended that, or stated that, yoga for recovery is beneficial for decreasing stress and anxiety. And no one said that it wasn't, but some folks just responded, it's somewhat beneficial. And then our participants are 100 or 95% of our participants are 100% likely to recommend yoga for recovery to someone who is also experiencing, has been impacted by substance use disorder, whether they themselves are in recovery or if a family or friend is in recovery. So I'm just going to briefly go over this. We did a Pearson correlation with all of our quantitative data, and basically the total outcome was that yoga for recovery benefits someone who is in recovery, and it's helped them with their well-being in the sense that they've attained mindfulness, a positive impact with yoga instructors. It's supportive, it benefits their physical health, recovery support, and helps with breathing. So some things I learned from yoga about mindfulness, acceptance, and not self are essential tools for my life. And then just some qualitative feedback on our instructors. It was hard for me to walk up to this class uninvited, and while in session, another instructor could not have made me feel more welcome. So I'm just going to go to our mind map. A lot of what we've found is that yoga really benefits and promotes mindfulness, community, recovery. The instructors were a big part of everyone's recovery. They felt, increased self-esteem. They felt pain relief, accountability. And then these are just some journals that are linking yoga to the improvement of well-being. Again, this is as well supporting stronger mental health, in treating substance use disorder. So I know I've been rambling, but basically what this data shows is that our participants at Washtenaw Families Against Narcotics with the Yoga for Recovery program are maintaining their sobriety. They're feeling a sense of inclusion with their community. They feel a sense of belonging. It reduces isolation and loneliness. And it overall is a strong component in them maintaining sobriety.
Thank you, Sadie. You were not rambling. That is an excellent study, and I'm grateful to you for taking it on. That's excellent. And Hilary offered to help Chelsea get that work published. So, which would be awesome, because it's the first step toward doing the stuff that Hilary's doing, where we measure the brain images and all of that stuff. You took that first step, Sadie, and for that, I'm grateful. Great job. And so I hope that people in recovery who are on this, who are streaming live on Facebook or who are Zooming in, take the next step to sign up and come and join Elliot and Dave. And let's get more women involved in yoga, okay? Please take advantage of this program. It's incredible. And we've got some questions. I saw, Hilary, you've been going back and forth with Chris Perry, who is a great guy from the Children's Foundation, from the Jamie Daniels Foundation. I'll get, if you haven't already connected with him, I can help facilitate that connection. But Hilary, there's a question here. We've got several questions. Let me go through, and if somebody can help me, I don't want to miss anything. Here's, Hilary, a question that I think it might be more of a comment than it is a question. And if this isn't in your wheelhouse, Hilary, no worries. But the question is, or the comment is, it seems intuitive that the use of opioids, even in a controlled setting such as MAT, would neurochemically have the described effect. However, what's confusing is the leap from demonstrating an effect on functional MRI as validating of the MAT approach. Very reductive and not addressing core issues in long-term sobriety. In general, MAT seems to be evolving from an appropriate temporary measure coupled to a long-term recovery into a be-all solution. I believe that this is an erroneous philosophy which tends to diminish the importance of durable sobriety and the methods of achieving that. So it wasn't so much a question as it was a comment, Hilary. Did you want to comment on that, or is that not in your wheelhouse, or go ahead?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Sorry. I was just trying to eat my dinner really quick.
Yeah, no worries.
David,
I gotta
I
do
like
that too.
I like hearing your thoughts. I'm not sure I completely understand if Matt is referring to martial arts therapy, but I'm happy to give my email address if you want to chat offline about that, because I completely agree. I didn't obviously have time to go into the limitations of functional MRI and how we interpret the data, but with this 30-minute format, but yeah, I'm happy to chat offline about it.
Yeah, and I can, I'll get you connected with the person that sent that comment. And then let me go over here to see if we've got additional questions. Those of you who are still out there, if I don't want to miss anything here. Angela, if you could put the survey back in the chat feature, please, everybody who's participating, take the time to send us that feedback. Thank you much, Hilary. Yes, of course. Kids Kicking Cancer, you got connected with Mr. Perry, which is great. The reason, well, somebody commented here, was Mary on, I think she was commenting on the fact that we got half guys and half women in our yoga classes. Washtenaw tends to be accepting of people, non-judgmental. go Washtenaw County. Okay, let me just scroll down through here. I'm a longtime addiction therapist and certified Yoga Alliance registered yoga instructor. Downriver Fan has endorsed my free Tuesday evening recovery yoga group in Trenton. Perennial Arts Yoga. Yoga for Recovery is entering the mainstream. I agree with whoever sent that, and I will tell you that when we were going around 5 years ago, trying to get someone to give us or rent us their place where we could hold yoga classes, that wasn't happening. Okay, and even in Washtenaw County, it wasn't happening. We had to knock on several doors until we found someone, and a lot of it had revolved around the stigma associated with the disease. And I had the door slammed in my face several times, not literally, but you know, they were just people, businesses were afraid of recovery. And so I just wanted to let, it says win curl thing. I agree with you. It's not the case anymore. It's getting a lot better. So thank you for posting that comment. We got a link if you want to sign up for Yoga for Recovery. We got somebody saying, please come to Washtenaw Community College and teach recovery yoga. Well, again, I'm just going through this. I think that is it. I will, Hilary, I'm going to get you connected with that individual. I'll do that tonight or in the morning. And I just wanted to, I'm going to ask everybody for if they have any more questions, please put them in the chat feature. I don't think there's going to be more questions, but I will wrap up with this. Hilary, you're awesome. We're going to be working together in the future. I assure you of that. I want to thank everybody for Zooming in and for streaming live on Facebook. As I mentioned at the beginning, a recording of this presentation is going to be made available. Typically, it takes about a week for us to get that out to everybody, but just know it's coming. And so you didn't really have to be taking notes, but I'm glad if you were, but know that the video is coming if you want to reference back to it. And then lastly, again, go to our website, learn more about our programs and all we have to offer to people in recovery, and our fundraiser on July 31st. We need golfers, we need businesses sponsoring, providing sponsorship to that fundraiser so that we can continue to offer these programs to the community we share and the people battling this disease. So with that, thanks everybody for Zooming in and streaming live on Facebook. And we will, oh, wait a second. Is there more information on the acupuncture class, or where can I find it? Ryan, you can, I don't think Chelsea, okay. Angela,
I'm going to send it over right now, the
Okay.
link for it.
Awesome.
And I do want to let you know, so there is a capacity for it, but it is something that we run every single month. It's a 2-part workshop. You'll see all the information in there. But once you attend, you're always welcome to come back. And day 2, part 2, everyone is always welcome. There's no capacity limit on that. We just ask that you do the first session so you are aware of the acupressure and are familiar with the points that we cover.
Thank you for that, Chelsea. Thank you to Elliot and Dave for sharing your stories, because that's what it's all about. And guys, for our meeting where we're sharing our stories, literally, at the 242 church. If you guys would come there and share your stories, it would be an honor to meet you both face to face and for you to share your story with all those who show up. Okay. And with that, everybody, thank you. And again, Hilary, thanks for doing this. We really appreciate it. Take care, everybody.